Hey, SEC family, I am so excited to share with you the very first Stones of Remembrance video blog. I told you Sunday morning that there's no way I could tell all these stories in the time allotted. So we're going to share with you 7 stories, 7 videos this week. Thank you for joining me for the first one. You know, people often ask me during the year, hey, Pastor Jerry, how did you come to be the pastor of Seminole Community Church? Or when did SEC start? Or some other question kind of asking about our origins. And this is what I always tell them. I always say this. I say, look, if we're having a cup of coffee or we're at dinner, this when this kind of conversation comes up. And this is what I always tell them. I say, listen, you need to, in November, you need to come to Stones of Remembrance, because that's where I tell the whole story of how our church came to be, the miracle of SEC. You know, pastors often say things like, it's a God thing, it's something that God did, or we shouldn't exist. And a lot of times people are like, yeah, whatever. Pastors are supposed to say stuff like that. But the truth is, as you heard Sunday, and as you'll continue to hear all through the month of November, Seminole Community Church really is a miracle. I always start by asking, hey, do you believe in miracles? Now, let me tell you something. The miracle about how we got started at SEC is something that we enjoy telling year after year after year. And this isn't new. We didn't invent this. For centuries, human beings have been sharing, families have been gathering, and human beings have been sharing their oral history to the next generation and the generation after that, so that everybody knows the story. You know, you probably experienced the same thing at Thanksgiving at your house. Do you remember when you used to sit over at the kids' table? Anybody sit at the kids' table? You used to sit at the kids' table where it's like peanut butter and jelly and macaroni and cheese. All the adults, they have all those tables lined up, and your aunts and your uncles and your grandparents and your great aunts and great uncles and maybe some trusted, close family friends. They're at the big table. They got the turkey and the gravy and the cranberry sauce, and you're over here with the kids. And they're always telling stories and laughing and yucking it up. And it's not like you want to be there because of that food. And those stories. But at some point you hit 13, you're 14, 15, maybe it's 16. I mean, you have to wait. There's no spot at the adult table, the big kids table, until somebody goes to be with Jesus, or, somebody can't make it. They get snowed in that year. And when you're about 15 or 16, at some point you're invited to the big table, the adult table. And when you get there, you've been in the family for 13, 14, 15 years. They start telling stories you've never heard of before. In fact, because you're there, someone will say, hey, tell them about Uncle Charlie, or tell them about that time that we moved from Pennsylvania down here, or tell them about the blizzard of whatever year. And they start telling you these stories that they've all heard. And when you hear those stories, you kind of like, I've been in this family my whole life, but now I'm in the family. And some of the stories that they tell, you kind of look at your mom like, is this true? And she gives you kind of a shrug like, that's how they always tell it. I guess it was true. And some of it is like almost lore. It's almost legend when those things are told. I can't wait until my kids are old enough to hear some of my grandkids are old enough to hear some of our family stories. This is what we do every year at SEC, because we want our kids, our grandkids, to hear the stories of our heritage, to know that God was in our midst. And one of the things that's important, because like my kids have heard all these stories, Kristen and Josh, for 27 years now, we've been doing Stones of Remembrance. They have been around when all these stories were told. But they weren't necessarily in the room. They were over in Kids Zone, or they were over in the nursery wing. And now that they've heard them repeated year after year, Nancy always says, if anything ever happens to you, if you drop dead of a heart attack in the middle of this, I could get up and tell these stories, because, I've heard them. She's heard them like 3 times a year for the last 25 years. Same thing with my kids. They could get up, Josh someday, Kristen someday, they'll be telling these stories even when I'm up in heaven. And I can't wait for Kristen and I mean, for Mila and Roman and Brooklyn and Nova and now baby Miley. I can't wait till they're old enough to hear these stories. It's like some of them are so crazy. I haven't told my granddaddy story in a long time. My great-granddaddy, I heard this story growing up. My great-granddaddy was born in 1899, Lester Dale Little. He fed his family through the Depression. You have any of those Depression, relatives? He fed them during the Depression by hunting in the Everglades. Now, when I say hunting in the Everglades, the story goes, I wasn't there, but it's been reported as true. My great-granddaddy had 4 daughters. They would sit in the back seat of this old beat-up old Rambler, and my granny Little, would drive down these dirt roads in the Everglades, and there's a canal on both sides down there. And Granddaddy would be on top of the car. And what he would do is he would be looking for a snake or an alligator or some kind of, and then he would pound on, when he saw an alligator, he would pound on the roof. She'd slam on the brakes, and he'd launch himself like a human spear, like Superman. He was like Superman, and he had a knife in his mouth, and he would kill whatever it was, put the knife in his mouth, swim back with this gator, this snake, this whatever. Unbelievable stories. But that was my family history. We have some of the same kind of unbelievable stories of what God has done in the midst of everybody here at SCC. Bona fide miracles. When you hear them, you can't. There's no other way that you can describe it as. Did God just do that? Those of us who were in the room. So I'm glad that you're going to join us this week. You're going to hear some stories every single day that I wasn't able to tell on Sunday morning, and I hope you'll join me again tomorrow. God bless you. I love you.